fired up for this Monday show. This is a really good Monday show. Second hour, we got Bishop Robert Barron on. He's got a brand new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. It's a very good book. He's always a great guest. So get your questions ready for Bishop Barron. We'll be taking questions on the new evangelization, essentially. If you have questions about what we're doing at this moment in a church, as a church, and how we can be better evangelizing the world to Christ, that would be those questions will be perfect for the second hour with Bishop Barron, and he's in many ways the perfect guy to answer those questions. First hour, well, we've got Jimmy Akin, but this is going to be a really fun hour. We're going to do faith and science. So if you have a faith and science question, this hour is for you. 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. 7884. You want to know something about how the book of Genesis comports with science, or what's the relationship between science and miracles, or any other faith and science type question, you're welcome to ask them. I have a giant stack here next to me, and this is all Jimmy Akin material. A Daily Defense, Fathers Know Best, Teaching with Authority, The Bible is a Catholic Book. Those are all Jimmy Akin books. And then I've got the latest CD version or CD production from Jimmy Akin, the Mysteries of Fatima. Jimmy is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and also the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Jimmy, thanks for doing this Monday with us.
Hey, my pleasure. Happy to help out.
And faith and science, you like both of those things?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Spock and Thomas Aquinas were my role models, so sure.
Yeah, all right. You sent this to me today, a little notice that there's water on the moon in places they didn't expect to find water on the moon. So let's just start there. If there's going to be science news, let's do it.
Yeah, well, NASA had I monitor science news every day, and a few days ago, NASA announced they had an exciting announcement about the moon Monday today, and I thought, unless there's life there, it's not that exciting. But because we already knew there was water on the moon, what they found that's new is that it appears to be, on the daylight side, not just up around the poles, not just in dark places, but in places that receive sunlight, and it actually gets quite hot on the moon when it's subjected to direct sunlight because of the lack of an atmosphere. The sun's rays just bombard it, and so it can be quite hot there, and that could lead to water not being present. But the good news is it looks like there's even more water than they knew about. And consequently, hopefully we'll be able to exploit that in the future when we have astronauts in moon bases and moon mining and all kinds of stuff like that going on. We're in fact planning on going back to the moon. The United States is with manned missions in just 4 years as part of the Artemis program.
I'm looking forward to that. It feels like it's so close but so far. One thing about space, though, it's very, very harsh to live in a place, say, with no measurable atmosphere. It's hard. Are they going to live underground?
Oh, yeah.
We're going to dig holes and live underground, or what are we going to do?
Maybe, or, build structures on the surface. But there's oxygen there. It's not in readily accessible form, but if they may, of course, they'll bring some initial starter oxygen with them, but then they'll presumably convert oxygen that's, in rocks or in the water, because all you have to do is, apply electricity to the water and you can get the oxygen out of it, and they'll be able to build up an oxygen atmosphere for a human environment.
888-318-7884. We're talking faith and science with Jimmy Akin this hour. Okay, so let's say we get cities on the moon, and then I'm going to mix faith and science here a little bit. And then the day of the Lord comes and the Lord returns and we're caught up with him in the air. What is going to happen with the people on the moon? They're not even here to meet Jesus when he comes.
Well, it's a question the magisterium has not answered, but if we speculate, I would speculate that all human beings are going to be involved in the final judgment, and so even if we have colonies elsewhere in the solar system or even beyond, that those people will be caught up and experience the final judgment and the eternal order with the rest of us.
Oh, all right. Okay. I'll go then. I wasn't going to go if I could miss out on something, but I'll go now. Actually, I think I'd be a terrible, terrible astronaut. I'd be probably dizzy and sick the whole way. Would you do it? Would you go? Like, say they could, reasonably safe.
Well, if
Like airliner safe, airliner safe.
if it's airliner safe, yeah, I'd probably do it. I don't
Yeah.
like airline travel, but getting to go to space would be really cool.
Yeah, right. Space is my favorite part of the world. 888-318-7884. Already the calls coming in. Why don't we just go to them? It's faith and science. Look, we're having some fun to start off a Monday. You always have these faith and science questions. Now you got Jimmy Aiken here to answer them. 888-31-TRUTH is the number. Let's start with Andrew, watching on YouTube in Tampa, Florida. Andrew, thank you so much for your call. Your question for Jimmy.
Thank you. So many people claim that the miracle of Our Lady of Fatima is just natural science with the sun. How can we defend the Church's miraculous claim to it?
Okay, so for folks who may not be aware, because most Catholics will be aware of this, but we have non-Catholic listeners. In 1917, a group of children in Portugal began reporting that the Virgin Mary appeared to them once a month for a number of months, and she predicted that on her final appearance there would be a miracle that everybody would be able to see. And indeed, in October of 1917, at her final appearance, there were thousands of people there, and people claimed to see the sun, among other things, see the sun behave in very unusual ways. It was reported as spinning or dancing in the sky, and this was witnessed even by people who were not people of faith. And so it's taken as supernatural confirmation of the reality of Our Lady of Fatima's appearances. There have been attempts to explain it naturally. Some people would say, well, if you're staring at the sun, it's going to hurt your eyes, and maybe that would cause it. But this seems to have gone beyond what would happen from just staring at the sun. That's not really what people reported. There have been speculations about what could cause this. For example, the priest and physicist Father Stanley Yaki, in his book on the subject, conjectures that there was an atmospheric phenomenon where conditions were right in the atmosphere that it caused the sun's rays to come through the atmosphere in a way they don't normally, and that created this visual effect that people saw. And if you buy Father Yaki's theory, that's perfectly fine. That doesn't mean it's not supernatural, because even if there are natural effects that can produce something, the fact it was supernaturally predicted ahead of time indicates this is still supernatural. It's one thing to say the atmosphere behaves in an unusual way, and that causes the sun's light to come down in an unusual way. But it's another thing to say that's going to happen on October 13th at the final apparition, and lots of people are going to see it. And because that's something that cannot be predicted just by random chance. A person makes a prediction like that, and 99+% of the time it's not going to come true. And so the fact you had the unusual atmospheric phenomenon, if that's what it was, is the fact it's predicted in advance gives you evidence that this is supernatural. Even so, there's not a problem with God using natural means to accomplish his ends. We even see that in the Bible, like when the Israelites crossed the Red Sea, it says God used a wind to do that. He had a wind blow all night, and it pushed back the waters, and they were able to cross. Then the wind stopped and the waters came back together. So even in the Bible, we see God using natural causation, or secondary causation, as it's sometimes referred to accomplish his ends. But just like the sun's going to dance on October 13th is something unpredictable in advance by natural reason, so the Red Sea is going to part. Is something supernatural that's unable to be predicted in advance. And so in both of these cases, you'd still have evidence that we're dealing with something supernatural, even if you say God used natural secondary causation to produce the effect he wanted. On the other hand, you don't have to buy a natural secondary explanation for what happened with the sun, because God's omnipotent and the laws of the universe are things he wrote. And consequently, if he wanted to just have the light coming in from the sun distort, even without a natural atmospheric phenomenon to cause that, he could do it. He could just operate directly on the light rays.
How's that? Is that an acceptable answer, Andrew?
That's perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for starting us off. We have a special hour with Jimmy Akin this hour. We're talking faith and science. If you've got a faith and science. I got that right. Okay. If you've got a faith and science question, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Anything about the intersection of faith and science, or you've got something, a bit of scientific knowledge, and you say, that doesn't seem to fit with what we believe, or maybe vice versa. Maybe you've got some piece of our faith, and you don't think that it fits with the scientific evidence. Or whatever, any kind of question about faith and science is welcome. 888-318-7884. The store-wide sale continues. The very best deals on great Catholic resources are at shop.catholic.com right now. Hundreds of items discounted 10 to 25% off. As I've said before, some even up to 50% off. And that counts on everything, including, I mentioned the stack of Jimmy Akin stuff. That's not even the beginning of the Jimmy Akin stuff that's available here. You can go to shop.catholic.com, and all of Jimmy's stuff is on sale right now. Plus $5 flat rate shipping if you live within the continental U.S. Visit shop.catholic.com today and check out the deals.
It's all about the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Wings is the weekly newsletter that's packed with program info, features, and updates of all that's going on at the Global Catholic Network. Just go to ewtn.com/wings. Fill out your name and email address, and you'll start getting your wings every week. When you get yours, send it to all your friends, and they can send it to their friends. And pretty soon, we're covering the whole world with the good news about EWTN. Wings, the weekly newsletter from EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live on a really great Monday, second hour. Bishop Robert Barron will be with us to discuss his new book. This hour, Jimmy Akin with us. All those who know Jimmy Akin know he enjoys a good science question. And it's fun to have a full hour where you can ask your faith and science questions of Jimmy Akin. 888-318-7884. Any age, welcome. Old or young, with your faith and science questions. And you certainly, if you're not a Christian believer and you'd like to ask your question from the perspective of an unbeliever, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. Thomas in Phoenix, Arizona is next. Thomas, also watching on YouTube. Hi, Thomas.
Hi.
Go ahead with your question for Jimmy.
Oh, great. Thank you. Jimmy, first of all, I just want to say, huge fan of your work. I have all your books sitting right next to me on my table.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. So my question, Jimmy, is something that has been really helpful for me has been, in my faith journey, has been seeing all the scientific evidence of all the miracles, right? The Eucharistic miracles, the apparitions, so on and so forth. Now, my question is, I feel like the church hasn't, there isn't really like a single source of truth or an official single source of truth, for all this scientific evidence. And my question is there a specific reason for that, or is it just that, they just haven't gotten around to it? Because if you look online, there's, conflicting evidence. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. So my question really is around that.
Well, so when we're talking about evidence connected with miracles in church history as opposed to biblical miracles, the church, there's been loads and loads of reports of miracles. I mean, it constantly every year, lots and lots of reports of miracles, and for the most part, and similarly apparitions. For the most part, it's left up to the judgment of the local ordinary, the local bishop, to investigate those. And so there's a kind of decentralized structure in terms of how the church processes those claims. Now, in some situations, the whether or not a miracle happened becomes relevant to the cause of canonization for someone who is being considered for sainthood. The church wants to answer the question, did a miracle happen through the intercession of this person, which would then give us evidence that the person is in heaven and thus might be declared a saint. And that actually there is a central processing place for that kind of case. And it's the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. So the Congregation for the Causes of Saints will investigate reports of miracles that are performed through the intercession of someone who has a cause for canonization open. And they do it in an interesting way. They have a separate scientific team and theological team looking at the miracle. And the scientific team gets the first say, and they don't care what your faith position is. If you're a scientist, they don't even ask what your religion is. They just they approach you and ask for your scientific opinion on, is this explainable or not? Most of these cases are medical. And so I know about a Canadian doctor who is a pathologist that was approached with some before and after results of photographs of someone, what had happened, I think in someone's bone marrow. And she did not know she was being approached by the Vatican. They wanted her unbiased opinion. They didn't even tell her they were with the Vatican. She thought this was going to be a court case, that someone was suing somebody over medical malpractice, and she looked at the slides and said, no, there's no way to explain that scientifically. Then she finds out this was a cause for canonization miracle investigation, and she herself was an atheist. So they really are looking for an objective scientific opinion. Is this explainable or not in terms of what we know about science? Then if it passes that stage, it gets looked at by the theological experts to say, okay, we have evidence that something supernatural here happened here. Is it likely to be of God or not? And so you do have a kind of miracle investigation team operated under the auspices of the Congregation for the Causes of Saints. And if you're a scholar, you can access those archives. In fact, the doctor who I mentioned later did access the archive. She went over to Rome. She got interested in how the church investigates miracles. She went over to Rome. She got access to the archives of the congregation, and she later wrote a book about medical miracles and how they relate to saints, and other miracles and how they relate to saints. And it's a fascinating read. But they don't just, at least they have not yet thrown all that open to the public. And so you kind of need to be a scholar in order to access this material. In terms of, could the church one day have some kind of public database of all this stuff? It could, but thus far it hasn't. And, the Holy See's website hasn't even gotten everything it needs to get online yet available online. So it may be a while before we have something as interesting as a central clearinghouse for miracle investigations, but it's possible.
Okay, Thomas?
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've sometimes thought with the, how shall I say this? Sometimes I feel like there are shortcomings in the secular media. Like when I see a newspaper report, the Vatican claims a miracle for this or that, saint cause or something. I sometimes wish, why don't they investigate that? Why don't they get a little curious? But they don't. I
Because the media is not about investigating stuff anymore. That's the old days.
Oh.
The media today is about rewriting press releases and spinning things politically and getting clicks.
I didn't know you were going to answer that question, but okay, I totally buy your answer, and I'm old. I want to give you a question from YouTube from Aaron, only because I want to make sure that we get some folks who are not our fellow Christian believers to get their questions in here. And if you're anybody can call 888-318-7884. But Aaron on YouTube asked a couple questions, but I just selected one. If Christianity, if Catholic Christians believe in science, why deny the age of the earth?
Well, the Catholic Church doesn't deny the age of the earth. In fact, the Catholic Church does not have an official position on what the age of the earth is. If you look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, for example, it understands the days of creation as a symbolic representation of the work of the Creator. It doesn't take them literally. And in another passage in the Catechism, it says that many scientific studies have splendidly enriched our knowledge of the age and dimensions of the Earth and the cosmos and the development of life forms. And they're thinking there of mainstream scientific studies. So there's no problem at all from a Catholic perspective if you want to say the Church is old. Now, because that's a matter of science, it's not a matter of church teaching. You know, the Bible doesn't say the earth is billions of years old, so it's up to scientists to provide evidence for that. But the Catholic Church respects the scientific studies that have been done that have concluded that. In fact, as far back as 1950, Pope Pius XII gave some speeches in which he highlighted evidence that scientists had been discovering that the Earth and the cosmos were billions of years old. He had absolutely no problem with that. In fact, the father of the Big Bang Theory, Father George Lemaitre, who is a Belgian priest, actually had to counsel Pius XII on, you know, all this science stuff is provisional, so don't oversell this. But the Pope was very supportive of that, and subsequent popes have been as well. By the way, I recently did just to give Aaron an illustration of a Catholic person of faith who's interested in science interacting with this question. On my podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, I recently did a 3-part series. It's episodes 119, 120, and 121 on the age of the Earth. And we cover both the biblical and the scientific evidence related to this question. And so I'd suggest you check that out if you'd like more. It's right there on YouTube where you're listening.
I hope you'll enjoy that, Aaron. And thanks for your question. Thanks very much. Questions are welcome here on Faith and Science this hour, 888-318-7884. I'm going to go back to you callers, but I want to just ask this, Jimmy, because I meant to ask you this at the beginning, because I wanted to clear something up. There's a tendency, I think, to talk about faith and science and talk past one another, because it's hard to have a clear definition of what science is for one thing, but also what are we talking about when we're talking about faith? Like, I think sometimes the science-minded person thinks faith means blind belief, in something. I just took a leap of faith, and for no reason I believe that. And then the faith, we all misunderstand science, frankly. I think even science writers sometimes, they use science as a word without coordinating it to a clear reality. So maybe help me out with, what are we talking about when we're talking specifically about science, but also what is faith?
Okay, so faith is, there are different ways of approaching it, but one way to approach it, and if I run out of time, we can talk more about this on the other side of the break, but one way to understand faith is it's believing that God has revealed certain things to us, and believing them because God has revealed them. Well, you don't have to believe something just because someone tells you God said it. It's reasonable to have evidence that God actually said it. And in fact, in the Bible, there are tests where if a prophet comes to you and says, "Thus saith the Lord," there are tests you can use to figure out, is that accurate or not? And some of them involve miracles. If a prophet says, "Oh, a miracle is going to happen next Tuesday," and it doesn't, well, guess what? That's evidence that this guy isn't really in communication with God. On the other hand, if he says a miracle is going to happen next Tuesday and this is exactly what's going to happen, and it does, like the Son of Man will be raised on the third day, well, then that's evidence that prophet is in communication with a superhuman source that has knowledge that normal humans don't have. And so it gives you reason to trust his messages. So faith does involve the use of evidence, but it involves being willing to accept things that are taught on the basis of good evidence without that go beyond what you can simply verify for yourself. And this is something that, for example, the writer C.S. Lewis talked about, how, almost everything we individually believe is something we have not proven for ourselves. We accept information from other human beings, and if we have reason to think they're credible, we believe that information. This is just the same principle being applied to God.
Okay, so I'll ask you about science when we come back, and then we'll go back to calls. The number 888-318-7884. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Faith and science, our topic. Your calls, welcome.
We're here for you. Call now. Catholic Answers Live.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly, touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world. Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest this hour. Jimmy, of course, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. He is senior apologist here at Catholic Answers. And Jimmy, sometimes the internet gets a little bit flip, and somebody says to somebody else, well, why would you believe that? And the other person says, because science, and then they put an exclamation point after it. And I feel like science is almost like a magic invocation there. So what are we talking about when we're talking about science? I feel like sometimes it's we use it as this tool for kind of beating each other over the head, but we don't actually have a good definition of what we're talking about.
Well, it's actually a question that is of interest to philosophers of science, and there's not a single agreed upon answer about what science actually is. There have been proposals to define science in terms of a specific method that's often called the scientific method, where basically you observe what's going on in the world, then you formulate a hypothesis that would explain what you see and enable you to make a testable prediction, and then you do the test. And if your prediction is right, then that's evidence that supports the hypothesis you proposed. But if the test fails, that's evidence against your hypothesis. And even though that's how scientific method is often described, philosophers of science have pointed out, well, actually there are situations where that's not really what scientists do. And so one way of, and I think this is probably the best simple way to explain it, is science is a collection of techniques that have been developed over the last few centuries that enable us to investigate and explain things that are going on in the world around us. And originally, they weren't distinct fields of study. The sciences weren't. Originally, it was all just philosophy. What we now call natural science used to be called natural philosophy or philosophy of nature. And the study of it goes, way, way far back in human history. I mean, Aristotle had whole books on different aspects of what today we would consider science, but back then they were considered philosophy. And over the centuries, it was so-called natural philosophers who studied nature and laid the foundations of modern science and started developing the techniques that eventually became part of science. But actually, the label scientist is very new. It only was coined in 1834. And it wasn't until later in the 1800s that you had people who would say professionally, I'm a scientist. That's what I do for my job. Before that, they were all just natural philosophers. But as more techniques got developed and as more knowledge about the natural world was cultivated, it got to the point that you could specialize in one branch of this or another. And so science started to drift away from philosophy and it started to spread out like the branches of a tree. And so you have today chemistry and physics and biology and all these different branches of scientific study that an individual can specialize in.
All right, a whole bunch of calls for you, Jimmy. Faith and science, our topic this hour. Jimmy Akin, our guest. Let's go to Bismarck, North Dakota. Dave, listening on 91.7 FM, Real Presence Radio. Your question, please, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. See, earlier this year, I heard a speaker talking about the Shroud of Turin, and he was saying that the image on the shroud was caused by like an energy blast that was similar to the atomic bomb, that was dropped in during World War II. And I was just wondering if that was true, or if you had any more information on that.
I'm aware of this claim. It's the idea is that the image on the Shroud of Turin is not a pigment, so it's not a painting. Instead, according to this, it's, if I understand the claim correctly, it's a scorch mark. And in order to produce this kind of scorch mark, you would need a high energy event that I would suppose released electromagnetic radiation in the gamma wave part of the spectrum. I've heard this claim. I have not personally dug into all of the claims regarding the shroud in depth yet, though I plan to in the future.
Okay.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that call.
Yeah. Also, I should point out, atom bombs are big destructive things that release lots of energy in an uncontrolled way, but that's not what happened in order to create the image on the shroud. There wasn't an atom bomb that did that. Whatever created the image on the shroud was a very controlled thing. And so just because this gets compared to something an atom bomb would do, don't think atom bomb level explosive.
Again, thank you, Dave. Thanks very much. Let's go to Travis in Dallas, New Mexico, listening on 96.7 FM. Travis, your question for Jimmy Akin. Travis? No? All right. Let me try. Hang on. We'll come back to Travis. Let's go to Noah in Westmont, Illinois, watching on YouTube. Noah, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thanks for having me on. So this is a somewhat scientific question. It's more relating to Mary. It kind of has to do with science, though. So my question is, why couldn't the Holy Spirit have just purified Mary's egg inside of her womb instead of having to purify Mary as a person in the Immaculate Conception?
Okay.
I get that like the Immaculate Conception is supposed to be about, Mary has to have been spared of original sin, otherwise she couldn't have been the bearer of Jesus.
Right.
But
so
yeah.
let me. This is a question that comes up periodically. It is more of a theological question than a scientific one, but the Immaculate Conception is the belief that God purified Mary at her conception, not when she became pregnant with Jesus, but that he purified her at her conception to protect her from original sin and its consequences, and thus make her a fitting mother for Jesus. And you will sometimes hear people claim that God had to do it this way, but that's not true, and that's not the church's teaching. The church only teaches that it was fitting for Jesus to have a mother who was pure, but God could have done it any way he wanted. He could have taken a prostitute and have his son become incarnate as the result of a prostitute if he wanted, as a way of showing the triumph of God's grace and holiness over sin, if he chose to do that. But it was fitting that Christ have a mother who was pure, and so God intervened and made Mary pure from the first moment of her existence, but it didn't have to be that way. God is omniscient and can do what he wants.
All right. I hope that was helpful to you. Thank you so much.
I'm omnipotent as well as omniscient.
Let's try Steve I was Joan in Bismarck, North Dakota. Steve, hang on. We're going to get to you. Joan in Bismarck, North Dakota, listening on 91.7 FM Real Presence Radio. Joan, your question for Jimmy.
Hi. So I recently had a sort of argument with my brother, who is a biologist.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
And we were discussing Eucharistic miracles, and his argument was that they couldn't be considered any sort of empirical evidence because there wasn't any proof of the chain of custody of the different hosts, and there wasn't any measure of the hosts before and after the transubstantiation. So I'm just wondering if there are any Eucharistic miracles like that where there is some sort of chain of custody that's been proven.
So this is your brother makes a valid point in terms of scientific evidence and providing conclusive proof, because if you want to cite a given object as having undergone a miraculous transformation, you do need to know the chain of custody. You need to know the provenance of the object, and you need to be able to ensure that there wasn't some kind of switch that happened at some point along the line, and you need to be able to exclude that if you're going to offer it as scientific proof. So I would agree that, and I'm not aware of any cases that have rigorously documented chains of custody. There may be some. I'm just not aware of them. But even if they're not, well, okay, so we would say we don't have conclusive scientific proof here, but that doesn't mean these don't provide evidence. And that, you can still have evidence even if you don't have conclusive proof. And so I would sort of, I guess, take a middle position and acknowledge your brother's point that it's not conclusive, but on the other hand say, well, that doesn't mean it can just be dismissed and it has no evidential value either.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Joan, just a quick note for you. Our friend Dr. Stacy Trasankos did some. She's a chemist, and she did some research into some Eucharistic miracles. You might look at her. Just look for Dr. Stacy Trasankos, her website, and I think she has some of the material there. So she looked at the science reports around some, and it might be of interest to your brother because he's a biologist, and she'd be happy to help you with that as well.
Again, the chain of custody is going to be important because even if you look at the object after its supposed miraculous transformation, and you say, yeah, that's not a wheat host anymore, well, you still need to know, well, what
was
happened
it?
along all the different stages.
Exactly. Okay. Thanks, Joan. Really appreciate the question. Wow. Now the lines are alight. We'll do our very best to get to everybody's question when we come back with Jimmy Akin. This hour, the topic, faith and science. More right after this.
Call us now with your question on Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
You've heard that St. Paul Street Evangelization supports hundreds of teams of evangelists sharing the good news. But did you know that some of these teams are public prayer stations? Set up a sign on the sidewalk and offer prayer and encouragement to those you encounter. Everyone needs prayer. Try this new method of witnessing to Jesus. Contact St. Paul Street Evangelization to get started at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Are you prepared to vote?
Citizens have co-responsibility for society. This duty especially obliges those in a democracy who must elect representatives to run the state on their behalf.
Learn more so you're prepared when you vote this November. Visit EWTN.com/vote for everything Catholic voters need to know before picking up a ballot.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Very exciting Monday show. Jimmy Akin with us this hour. We're talking faith and science. We get to ask Jimmy anything you want about faith and science. Second hour, Bishop Robert Barron, who you know from everywhere, to talk about his new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. Let's go to Gastonia, North Carolina, listening on EWTN Radio. Up next is Stephen. Nope. Stephen, of course, right when I go to the line, drops. So we got another Stephen, and I don't know where he's from, but I'm going to go to line one real quick. Maybe it's the same Stephen, maybe just on a different line. Stephen, you there with us?
Yes, I am.
All right. You got a question for Jimmy Akin?
Yes, sir. Jimmy, I'm a really big fan of your show, and my question to you is, how do we balance looking at, say, miracles from the Bible in balancing the faith and reason perspective of trying not, seeing things logically, but also not trying to take a naturalistic kind of look at miracles and acknowledge them for what they actually are? Does that question make sense to you, sir?
Well, let me take a stab at it, and you tell me if I've answered it, okay?
All right.
So in the Bible, we have reports of things. The Bible is written in human language, and as a result of that, we have to seek to understand precisely what it's claiming. In some cases, it says things that are very ordinary, that are very quotidian or unsurprising, like King so-and-so went into battle and defeated his enemy. Well, that happens all the time in the world. So that's something that, doesn't raise too much of a question about how to interpret it. It's fairly straightforward in most cases when you encounter that kind of claim in the Bible. But then you encounter other kinds of language that would be very extraordinary, like in the prophets it'll say, and the trees all clap their hands. Well, trees don't have hands and they don't clap them. So is this a miracle where God is miraculously enabling trees to have hands and clap them, or is it something else, like a literary expression? Well, most scholars have no problem looking at that kind of statement and saying, okay, this is not a miracle claim. This is a literary expression. It's figurative. On the other hand, you have other extraordinary claims like the Son of Man rose from the dead. Okay, you read it in context and it's clear that's not a literary expression. That's a miracle. Now, there are fringe cases where it's hard to decide between which one of these categories we should put a statement in. And that's understandable, but scholars just need to understand the literature better to try to figure out how do the rules that apply to this literature work, and that will enable us to better sort the different claims and analyze them and figure out, okay, exactly what's being said here and what's not being said here. So, there are obvious cases, but there are also fringe cases where it's a little hard to distinguish. Kind of like, if you're looking at a color spectrum, there's an obvious difference between red and orange. But if you try to say, where exactly is the line between red and orange, it's not so clear. And similarly, in complex works of literature, it can be a little difficult to categorize everything, but it's something that's possible in principle. And if we're open to the evidence of reason in studying how ancient literature worked, that can inform us. And if we're open also to the supernatural, so that we don't have to dismiss everything as, oh, that must be, erroneous, or that must be a figurative statement. That also will help us. So both faith and reason have a role in trying to figure out how to take various biblical passages and various reports of things that look like miracles in the Bible. Does that help?
I mean, that was awesome, Jimmy. Again, I love your show. Look forward to listening to it every week. Thank you.
Well,
thank you,
Stephen. Since you brought it up, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. What's out on Friday, Jimmy? What's the new one going to be?
Well, this is a fifth Friday, so it's a weird question show.
Oh, good.
We're going to be talking about our transporters, murder machines, among other things.
I tend to think they might be murder machines. Let's go to Kansas. JD's in Kansas, listening on 97.3 FM. JD in Kansas, your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yep. Okay. Thanks for taking my call. I am a farmer, and it's going to sound like a weird question, but sometimes cows, namely young female cows or heifers, they will get bred unfavorably. They weren't supposed to be bred. Maybe the neighbor's bull got in the pasture. Well, there is a drug you can give them that is called a luteinizing hormone, and it will, will abort them if they are pregnant. And I got to thinking about that the other day, and I was just curious, is that morally acceptable to do that? I've never done it before, but people do it, so I didn't know. I didn't know if that was morally acceptable or not. Because they are animals, they're not humans, and I just curious.
Okay.
Right. So being a farmer, you have cows, and I appreciate that. My family also had a cattle ranch, which my grandmother maintained alone until she was 83 years old when she finally sold the cows. And every summer, we would drive down to Texas, and there would be a cow that would be butchered, and we would have meat for the next year. So, JD, is it okay with you if someone butchers one of your cows? I mean, with your consent.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is essentially the same thing, just at an earlier stage of the cow's development. God has not given humans the right to take human life, but he has given animal life and plant life into our hands so that they can serve human needs. And so if you need meat, you can butcher a cow. If you need wheat, you can harvest your wheat. If you need to terminate a pregnancy in a cow so that it doesn't cause problems, well, that's serving a human need. And so it would be legitimate in principle to do that. Now, I not being an expert in this area, I don't know exactly why one would do that. You said bred unfavorably. I assume that means there are negative consequences to her bearing this cow.
Go ahead, JD.
Typically, the calf would be like, say the calf was born in the spring, and then the bulls are in with the cows and the calves in the summer. The heifer calf may have matured a little faster than the other ones, and the bull got her bred before we got the bull out. So, say she got bred when she was 400 pounds. She's probably only going to weigh about 600 or 700 pounds when she has the calf, and will most likely lose her, the calf, or both. is
Right,
why
so
someone would do that.
Yeah, you don't want to have a calf under 600 pounds.
Well, no. So it poses a danger to the life of the calf or the cow or both, and that would be a reason to go ahead and terminate the calf in this case, and that's okay because the calf is not a human being.
I got to know, how big does she have to be to safely calve? I don't know how big a cow has to.
Preferably, like on a heifer, 800 to 1,000 pounds.
Yeah, that's what I was
kinda
thinking.
where their body frame's big enough, where they typically won't have a lot of trouble.
Yeah, so about a VW bug. She's got to weigh about as much as a VW bug. Okay, JD, thanks. You're satisfied with the answer?
Bet. Yes, sir.
I don't want to be around any 1,000-pound bugs. That's scary.
No, that is scary. Yes. Thank God for JD and all the farmers. Thank you all. I love the food. I really appreciate it. I love the food.
Especially the tasty animals.
They are some delicious animals. Although I have to say, I have to thank the fishermen for some of my favorite animals to eat. But but I'm very grateful to the farmers as well.
Like they say, if God didn't want us to eat animals, He wouldn't have made them out of meat.
Exactly. That was a foolish move on his part if he wanted us to stay away from them. I just love talking to farmers too. I don't know why. It's fascinating. Like he knows how much it is, isn't it? Annie says, yeah, it is.
There are sciences here: agronomy, animal husbandry. That's part of science.
All right. So let me ask you a faith and science question, Jimmy. We do. Okay. Do you? Well, I guess this is more of an opinion question, but it seems to me like a few years ago, maybe around the turn of the century, there was this intense assault on the idea that faith and science could coexist at all. I feel like people have calmed down on that a little bit. And do you feel like that? Like it's calmed down a little bit?
I think so. The part of it is the new atheists, the four horsemen of the new atheism, have sort of passed from the scene. They've had their fad day, and they were ones that were really stirring that idea up. And I also just think there's been a shift in how people understand this. There are a lot of courses, for example, a lot of books that deal with the history of science that point out, hey, these things have never been irreconcilable. In fact, the Teaching Company has a couple courses on the history of science from antiquity to 1900, and I listened to them both. They're both outstanding, and they both make the point of just how much faith and science have been intertwined all the way down through history, and how people of faith don't dismiss science. And it's been them, because the people in the past have been very religious, it's been them who were driving the scientific enterprise forward. And in a Christian context, is a way of understanding God's creation and his work and his glory. So in the Middle Ages, for example, you had scholars, scientists, theologians like St. Albert the Great, who were exploring scientific questions as a way of trying to understand and appreciate God's creation and also his own glory.
Right. And it's also just a historical fact that science as an academic discipline, it never could have happened without the Christian contributions. I'm thinking particularly of the creation of the medieval hospitals and universities, where all this science picked up steam over time.
Mm-hmm. And then the scientific revolution didn't launch until, say, the 1500s. And that was in a firmly Christian age. And the key scientists that drove it forward were Christians. Isaac Newton being a great example. I mean, he's considered the most important scientist in history, even more than Einstein. Yes, really.
Yeah.
And Isaac Newton was intensely interested in theology. He also was a heretic, but he kept that on the down low. But he was a person of faith, and also considered the greatest scientist in history.
Jimmy Akin is our guest. You can find his writings at jimmyakin.com. You can find him at our website, Catholic.com. And he's got a whole bunch of books over at shop.catholic.com. If you want to have some nice short snippets, I always recommend A Daily Defense. It's a fun one you can work your way through. The latest one is The Bible is a Catholic Book. Jimmy, it'll be weird questions on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World
This Friday.
Nothing about cows. He said that's a weird question, but I don't even think you would have taken that as a weird question. That's a perfectly normal. Weird questions are things about ghosts, about spaceships, aliens. I can't think of what else, but all that will be on Jimmy.
I'm happy to answer non-weird ones too.
Yeah, that was a good one. Thanks, Jimmy.
My pleasure.
See you later in the week. Up next, Bishop Robert Barron. You know Bishop Robert Barron. He made the Catholicism series, and since then he's been probably about the most famous Catholic in America. He's got a brand new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. We'll talk with him about it next on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Our just a great Monday show continues. I feel a little bit like Dave Letterman this hour. My next guest needs no introduction. And for most of our listeners, he really doesn't need an introduction ever since he made the TV series Catholicism that aired on PBS and subsequently has been shown in virtually every church hall in the English-speaking world. So now's the time to get the kids together because our guest this hour, Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, founder of Word on Fire, and probably the best spokesman for the Catholic faith in the internet age, Bishop Robert Barron. I'm so happy to welcome you again to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being here.
Cy, thank you. Always good to be on with you.
You have a brand new book out, Renewing Our Hope, Essays in the New Evangelization. I am in the midst of reading it now. And I'm coming across names like Schleiermacher and Nietzsche and Tillich and Rahner and Lonergan and von Balthasar. And I'm thinking to myself, this is grown-up stuff. It's not dry or difficult reading. But I feel like you're treating me like an adult, like a grown-up. And maybe that's part of the point of the book, is that we need to have these, be able to speak as adults about our faith.
Yeah, because I was trained as an academic and I taught for many years and did that sort of writing. And then I went off into evangelization and more popular forms of communication as well. And I think that's much needed and very important. But I always want to keep my hand in the game academically. So pretty much every year, I agree to give, one or two major lectures or speeches in a more academic setting. So this book represents, it's a collection of these over the past maybe 5 years, roughly since I've been made a bishop. But yes, I think we need, as I've been for years decrying a dumbed-down Catholicism, and we need to engage the academy as well as to engage the more popular world. So I've tried to do both, in the limited time I have, but this book represents a much more academic effort. Yeah, as I said, it's not dry or difficult to read, but I just felt like a grown-up reading it, and particularly the chapter on von Balthasar. It seemed to me that you're arguing in there for a kind of thinking about the church and thinking about what we're doing as Catholics, as Christian people, that is not just accommodating itself to the world and trying to, find that explanation of the faith that will somehow convince the world, but one that just arises out of the person of Christ and says, who is this and what is this about? And it seems so exciting. Yeah, and that essay, they asked me to write that for a book that has that same title. They asked a number of scholars, how did Balthasar change your mind? Oh. And for me, that was a really good exercise because I was formed very much, for want of a better term now, in a very liberal Catholicism style, which means beginning very much with your experience, now reading the doctrine of the church in light of your experience. Now, the deepest roots of that, and you mentioned some of those names, on the Catholic side, people like Karl Rahner, on the Protestant side, Paul Tillich. Go back behind both of them to the 19th century, Friedrich Schleiermacher, who's the founder of modern liberal Protestantism. That style became very prominent within Catholicism in the years after the Council, exactly when I was coming of age. So I would have taken in that theology very much. And by the way, it came into preaching quite a bit. Most preachers were formed in that style of thinking. Let's relate it immediately to people's spiritual experience. Well, what Balthasar did for me when I finally got around to reading him was, it was a kind of Copernican revolution. He was saying, I get it, I read all those people, I understand the experiential approach, but Jesus, the object of our contemplation, is so much more interesting and strange and unnerving than whatever we can take in through our kind of ordinary spiritual frame of reference. And so he shifts the focus from subjectivity to the objectivity of the form, is how he'd put it. But see, he's a Catholic, so the form is displayed liturgically, the form is displayed sacramentally, and the form is displayed in the lives of the saints. When you look at a Maximilian Kolbe, well, I don't care how spiritually alert you are, there's something about him that just knocks you down, that knocks you over, it makes you think differently. And all the saints have that quality. Well, I began reading Balthasar seriously when I was a doctoral student in Paris many years ago. And I still vividly recall that experience of something new unfolding. And then my thesis director was a great man, still alive, called Michel Corbin, Jesuit scholar of Anselm and Aquinas. And he was a great Balthasar man. And so in the seminars with him in my doctoral studies, I was taking this in more and more. Then when I got back to teach in Chicago, I just offered a course in von Balthasar to sort of compel myself to read him really carefully. And anyone that's attentive to Balthasar and then starts looking at my work over the years over both academically and at a popular level, they're going to see Balthasar everywhere in it.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So that was an important little article for me to write.
It strikes me that Balthasar is following after Romano Guardini, and so does Cardinal Ratzinger, later Pope Benedict, and the seminal work there being the Lord, and this idea that stop kind of thinking, I have all these questions and I'm so interesting, and what can the Bible throw at me? But start looking at the person of the Lord, and then everything is transformed.
Yeah, you know, I've used the comparison to Tolkien. So Tolkien in The Lord of the Rings has to draw you into the world that he's created. And so the first part of The Lord of the Rings is an introduction to this strange, differently textured universe. And once you're in it, then you can be drawn into the story. Well, the Bible's like that, isn't it? If I try to now explain the Bible on my terms, I'll make it accessible to my frame of reference. Well, okay, but what that does is it renders pedestrian the Bible. And the real glory of that story is then, you know, rendered rather dull. Now, I would say, welcome to most of the preaching from the 1970s and 1980s.
My life.
Well, yeah, no, and that's where I came of age at that time, you know. And but it was sort of a flattening out. Like, here's the biblical reading. Well, let's not spend too much time with that. Let me tell you about my vacation, and I'll draw some little connection to. Yeah. Rather than go back to this is Origen, Augustine, Chrysostom, Aquinas, coming right up through Newman and into the 20th century. The great preachers whom we reverence and whose sermons we remember didn't preach the way I was trained to preach. They preached in a deeply biblical way and drew you into that strange world. So that's kind of a Balthasarian shift.
Yeah. And then towards the end of the book, oh, by the way, the book is Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization from Bishop Robert Barron. And you can get it wherever good books are sold, but you can check out Word on Fire, of course, for all of Bishop's works and productions. Do you? By the way, do you prefer working in print, or do you like making films? Like you've been proficient.
I like doing both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like doing both. I was trained. You know, I'm old school, so I was trained with books and pieces of paper and words.
Yeah.
So I do like that world. I've wrecked my eyes. I've read so much,
Yeah.
But I also enjoy making the films. I didn't know that much about it to begin with, but kind of learned as I went. I'm surrounded by wonderful people that know that world much better than I. But I totally get the power of it.
Yeah.
And as I say, a lot of what I talk about in articles and books, you see manifest in the films. Yeah. And even like in the YouTube commentaries and all that, you'll see it in a more vivid presentation there.
And there, I mean, you can really, the series Catholicism really just, it had so much power that I think that people started to see, there is a real power in getting the images and the sound and the sights and the words all coordinated together. There's just a tremendous power to that. And I noticed towards the end of the book here, you talk about quite a few films, including the great Babette's Feast, but part of your thing, I mean, I guess if I had to say the Bishop Barron thing, part of it is you really believe in beauty as a tool of evangelization, as a tool of humanizing the world.
Absolutely. And I've said for many years, you got the three great transcendentals, right? You have the true, the good, and the beautiful. And all three are valuable. All three lead to God, who's truth itself, goodness itself, beauty itself. But today, the beautiful is probably more winsome for most people because our postmodern world is so skeptical of claims to truth and claims to goodness. Who are you to tell me what to think or how to behave? But the beautiful, I think, is less threatening. You just show something. Look at this. I'm not telling you what to think or how to behave, but look at this. And the wager is, and I see it paying off all the time, that wager, is it will lead people to God. And I've often compared it, Si, to the Brideshead Revisited, that one, maybe the greatest Catholic novel of the 20th century, which begins with a kind of a cool, skeptical rationalist, Charles Ryder, who's the narrator. And what first draws him into Brideshead, this great manor house, but Brideshead is evocative of the church. What first draws him in is the beauty of the place. He's an artist, and it's the beauty draws him in. And then as the novel unfolds, he begins to see the moral demand of the place. And then finally, at the very end, he comes to accept the truth of it, And I think that's Balthazar, by the way, is it's better to begin with the beautiful, then go to the good, and then finally come to the true. And I've always felt just instinctually that's the right way to do it.
Bishop Robert Barron is our guest. I realize I'm making you wait, callers, but we are going to get to you shortly here. The brand new book is Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. I can highly recommend it to you. It's engaging. Well, it's Bishop Barron. It engages the intellect very, very well, but in a way that is accessible to those of us who need things to be accessible, and I'm one of those. Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. The Word on Fire Ministries that Bishop Barron is the founder of has a Bible out, the Word on Fire Bible. It's groundbreaking. It introduces readers who might not otherwise expose themselves to the Bible or might have difficulty doing so by adding all kinds of surrounding kind of the biblical text with commentary, explanations from church fathers, many of the great saints, mystics, scholars throughout Christian history, and some from Bishop Barron himself. The Word on Fire Bible, I heard I don't know if this is true, but I heard you printed a whole bunch of them and then they just sold out. And but they got more. And we want you to get it. So we've got it now at a very special price at shop.catholic.com. We know you can get it wherever good Catholic books are sold, but take a look over at shop.catholic.com. See if you like the deal there. But more than anything, get yourself, especially if you got that young person who's like, I don't even know how to crack open a Bible. Give them the Word on Fire Bible. They'll figure it out. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
That's why we...
Oh, go ahead, Bishop.
Oh, okay.
No,
that's why we made it. Really was for that audience in mind, people that would normally just be put off by a regular Bible. This is meant to draw them in with their senses and their imagination.
It's a foreign world to us. We do need help getting into it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Right back with your questions for Bishop Robert Barron.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. Coverage as seen through a Catholic lens.
All people of faith and sincerity need to awaken to this and protect this fundamental right of religious liberty.
Expert analysis.
Does Revelation judge history, or does history judge Revelation?
Stories vital to people of faith.
It's part of our faith that comedy and tragedy naturally go hand in hand.
Delivered to your inbox every week. Sign up today. Go to EWTN.com/worldover.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We are always so happy when Bishop Robert Barron is here. I don't know if you know this about Catholic Answers, but we're a communication ministry, and we try to be everywhere in every medium communicating the truth about Jesus Christ and his church. And then you got a guy like Bishop Robert Barron who does it better than anybody and is just powerfully effective. And it's exciting to get to talk with him. He's got a brand new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. Bishop, there's a lot of people who want to talk to you. You all right going to the phones?
Good. Yeah, great.
You're not scared? All right.
Let's do it.
All right. William in Georgetown watching on YouTube. You are up first, William. Go ahead with your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hey, thank you for taking my call. My question is, how can us Catholics spark a revival for the Catholic Church in America and other places around the world?
Great. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I go right back to Vatican II. The universal call to holiness means that the laity are called upon to make holy their realm, which is the secular realm. By being great Catholic politicians, great Catholic lawyers, great Catholic writers, great Catholic business leaders, great Catholic teachers, great Catholic parents, great Catholic coaches and athletes, great Catholic entertainers. So what I would say is that's the role of the laity, is to invade those spaces non-violently and not oppressively, but be holy in those places and sanctify them by your own presence, your own work, your own witness. I always see, if Catholics are kind of waiting around for the bishops to get it together and give us the program. Well, Vatican II gave us the program. Bishops are here, bishops and priests, to teach and to sanctify and to send the laity into the world. So I say go. The Catholic revival starts with you and with your sanctification of the space that you find yourself in.
William, I'm so glad to have that question. Thank you for starting us off there. I thought the answer was going to be get in Twitter fights, but no, apparently that's not the...
Yeah, that's really helpful. The worst place in our culture right now, it seems to me, are those spaces.
Oh, I enjoy getting abused on Twitter.
In our culture. Just terrible.
I know, and it does seem that people are finally starting to get a little sense of frustration at the social media.
I hope so.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But we like things that are not bad for us. You may have encountered this as a priest, but that's one of the things we human beings do. We like things that are not...
It's like everything else that's good and bad. I mean, thank God for the social media. We both use it,
right.
but then it gets abused in this weird way,
Yeah. How many followers do you have on Twitter? I just want to compare to how many I have. I think I have 87.
I don't remember.
More than 87 or less than 87? Because I think I have 87. Let's go to JC in Gallup. William, thanks very much. I really appreciate the call. JC in Gallup, New Mexico, watching on YouTube. You are next, JC. Your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop Robert Barron. Hello. I wanted to say I was spellbound by your revelation this morning, today, Your Excellency, by that at Mundelein Seminary, Father Gregory, then Father Gregory, was your spiritual director. So that was amazing. What is your... Yes. What is your connection to the Lavender Mafia in any way? And also...
come on. I mean, I appreciate the call. And here's the deal. We open the phones up. We say you can call and ask anything you want. But if you don't tell the truth to the call screener, it's not a respectable question. So you can call another day, JC. Thanks for the call. Bishop Robert Barron is our guest, one of the greats, someone that we are just absolutely love to be associated with. We're very grateful that he takes the time to be here with us. Let's see. Let's go to Lawton in Tampa, Florida, listening on Catholic Answers. Oh, well, he must be on the website. Let's hang on, Lawton. I got to push the right button. Go ahead, Lawton. Go ahead. Your question for Bishop Barron.
I first want to thank you for your work on my theological journey and all the help it's done. My question is, how do we evangelize those who are so angry over the sex abuse crisis?
Thank you.
Yeah, and I get it. That's why I wrote that little book, was it last year or 2 years ago, Letter to a Suffering Church. I mean, I get it. I referred to the sex abuse scandal as the devil's masterpiece, which has undermined our church in every possible way, including evangelization. And every single day on my social media and other places, I run into people who are understandably, and justifiably angry about it. What I tried to do in that book was, first of all, fully to acknowledge the reality of this. And how can I not? I mean, I see it every single day. But also to remind people that there's such a beautiful substance of the church that remains in place, despite the sins of its members. And that's always been true from the time of St. Paul to today. And to look at the sacraments and look at the Eucharist and look at the saints and look at the authority of the bishops and the Pope, look at the Mass, and those are the reasons why we say and why we fight for the church. So I would, without trying to brush things under the carpet, I would really emphasize these permanently valuable and beautiful features of the church's life. We still have the words of everlasting life, not because they're our words, they're Christ's words. And Lord, to whom shall we go? So think of St. Peter there saying that, knowing full well his own weakness, knowing full well the weakness of everybody around him. And, well, Lord, to whom shall we go? You've got the words of everlasting life. And the faith of the church is that those words are still echoing within the life of the church, especially in those words of consecration that make him really, truly, and substantially present in the Eucharist. So those are the reason we evangelize, and that's, I think, our our inspiration for evangelizing, even during this rough season.
Lawton, is that acceptable to you? What do you think?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good. Thanks.
Appreciate your question. Bishop Robert Barron is our guest. The new book from Bishop Barron, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. I am enjoying reading them myself right now. And they come in, it's from quite substantial philosophy and theology all the way to stuff that I can read comfortably. You're as I said, that last essay on movies, it's just great. It's just a great, I suppose there's a certain way in which many people just want to be at war with the culture. And then but that's not really a strategy for us, is it?
No, and that's, my mentor, Cardinal George's great line I always come back to is, you can't evangelize a culture you don't love. If you're just in an attitude of antipathy toward the culture, and God knows there are things in the culture that we need to be against, that's no question. But unless you love the culture in some way, you can't evangelize it. So from the very beginning, I started looking at films because so many people find not just entertainment, but they're looking for meaning from films. And so I use the strategy of, well, what can I find in a film that is resonant of the gospel, that echoes with themes from the gospel. And as I remember in that essay, I do some Christ figures, right, from like Shawshank Redemption and from Gran Torino, one of my favorite films of recent years. But they're filled with the gospel. Those films are unthinkable apart from Christ.
Yeah. Right.
And so why not, point that out?
Let's go to Eleanor in Notre Dame, Indiana, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Hang on there, Eleanor. Let me get the right number. There, Eleanor, go ahead with your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop Barron. Thank you for taking my call. It's a real honor to talk to you.
Thanks.
My question is, so I've heard that throughout history, when the church goes through rough periods, that is the time where a great saint comes about. So my question is, would you say that would be something the church is going through now, where there's going to be a saint, or is it not that bad? Do you know what I mean?
No,
I think it's that bad.
I'm with you. No, I'm with you. I remember, I'll quote Cardinal George again. I remember one time around the table with him, he said, where are the movements? Where are the saints? Because he was instinctually feeling what you just talked about, that it's precisely in times of crisis. Think of when the Benedictine movement emerges as the Roman civilization is collapsing. Think of the Dominican and Franciscan movements when the church was going through time of great corruption. Think of the Jesuits emerging at the time of the Reformation. Think of like the Cardinal George's own order, the OMIs. Think of the CSCs who were there at Notre Dame where you are. They emerged after the French Revolution when there was a great cultural crisis in Europe. So yes, the crisis of our time, it's two things. One is the crisis of the nuns, right? The unaffiliated, those who are claiming no religion, the secularism, but also the crisis interior to the church of the scandals. And so yes, this is the time. And I'd put that call out to all Catholics. This is your moment. How is the Spirit stirring you? Where are the charisms being stirred up? And there are signs of life and signs of hope. And so don't just despair. I think you can see the Spirit operating. The very fact that in the wake of the new atheist movement, remember this goes back about 20 years when the new atheists were just pummeling religion. Well, what emerged from that is so many, yours is a good example of it, expressions of apologetics and evangelization and a smart engagement of the church's issues that emerged as a response to it, So in a similar way, I think in the crisis of secularization and the crisis of our own scandals, this is the time for the saints. So get going, saints.
Eleanor, okay?
Yes, thank you, Bishop Barron, and I'm praying for you.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
It does. Bishop, maybe you have the same experience I have, but when you get to go out and give talks places and visit different parishes, you really do run into saintly people. And you come back kind of feeling like, it's okay. God's got this. He's got saints all over the place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, all my priesthood I've sensed that. And, that's the whole point of the priesthood. I had the privilege a couple of days ago. It's rare for an auxiliary bishop. I was able to ordain a man to the priesthood. And that's what I told them. I said, the whole purpose of the priesthood is to serve the baptized.
Yeah.
And when you lose that link between holy orders and baptism, you have what Pope Francis calls clericalism.
Yeah.
But the whole point of the priesthood is to empower and.
We got to take a quick break. Sorry, Bishop. Bishop Robert Barron, our guest, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization is his new book. We'll be right back with more of your calls for Bishop Barron right after this.
Let us help you with your question today on Catholic Answers Live.
If you spend any time on Twitter, Facebook, or mainstream media, you're probably familiar with the litany of slogans that skeptics employ to rescue you from the foolish belief that God exists. The constant onslaught seems to leave people with the idea that they have no alternative but to embrace atheism. How can a Christian respond? In One Less God Than You, John DeRosa breaks down 20 of the most common atheist challenges and shows you how to craft effective answers. Atheism is more aggressive and widespread than ever. Read One Less God Than You and prepare yourself to respond with the joyful truth that God is real. To get your copy of One Less God Than You, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
To many people, even many Christians, purgatory is a fantasy, or worse, a wicked lie invented by the church to make salvation complicated and keep people in fear. But I'm here to tell you that purgatory is fact, not fiction. The Bible supports it, Christians have historically believed in it, and it makes theological sense. In my new book, Purgatory is for Real, I provide the evidence and reasoning to help you understand this controversial doctrine and demonstrate how it's actually a joyful, hopeful reality, not something shadowy and mysterious, but a sign of God's love and mercy. To get your copy of Purgatory is for Real, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I love Mondays. I love coming in here on Mondays and getting to go back on the air. It's always exciting to get to come back. But when you get a guest like Bishop Robert Barron, that's a pretty good Monday. Bishop Barron has a brand new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. Also, Word on Fire. His ministry has the Word on Fire Bible, which is just going gangbusters, and I'm glad it is because it's one of those. It's surrounded with. The Bible, the books of the Bible themselves are surrounded with materials that can help you crack open that Bible, which is what it's there for. And so we're delighted to welcome Bishop Robert Barron as our guest. The number is 888-318-7884. As you might imagine, the lines are very busy today, but we'll do our very best to get you on with the bishop. And up next, we go to Atchison, Kansas. Listening on the Catholic Answers Live app is Joe. Joe, thank you for downloading the app onto your phone. Go ahead with your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop. I'm a senior here at Kennedy College, and I actually am originally from the Mundelein area of Illinois.
No
and
kidding.
Marytown is one of my favorite places. Marytown is one of my favorite places on earth, and I've been a big fan of yours. I'm an aspiring Catholic Bible scholar too. I'm trying to eventually get my PhD, and my question for you is, where do you see the church going in the future with the threat of communism and progressivism being so fueled with people my age?
I think I heard it right. You said the threat of communism and progressivism being so popular with younger people.
Yep.
Yeah, I did a video a couple of weeks ago on some of the philosophical sources of what I think we're seeing today in the culture. And I put my finger on Marx and Nietzsche and Sartre and Foucault as people that have really shaped the contemporary conversation. And I think that's unhappy. Wrote another article a little bit later about the social protests in the 60s that were often led by religious people, most famously Martin Luther King. There was a congruence between, the protests for justice and the great religious tradition. And what I was sort of noticing and bemoaning a bit was the lack of religious connection to much what's going on today, because it's born of different assumptions. So that does concern me. And I think those of us who kind of saw the end of much of communism anyway, and certainly knew the stories of how brutally oppressive it is, are little charmed, by attempts to go back to it. So I share that concern. And then the kind of woke progressivism, I'm not a fan of that. Give me classical liberalism any day over that. I think that's a much better conversation partner with the church. I would say people like you have got to be very active in turning the tide. In other words, to bring the biblical vision, and that's ultimately what we're talking about. When you mention Catholicism, you're saying it's a vision that comes up finally out of the Bible, and that's a very distinctive vision. It has to do with God, with anthropology, with society, with how we relate to each other, and that has got to be the narrative that comes to predominate. We have to out-narrate them, as the scholars say sometimes, make that narrative more compelling to people than these counter-narratives coming up out of the woke tradition. So anyway, that's a rambling answer, but ultimately I come back to people like you and your age to keep, out-narrating the opposition and keep proposing the Catholic and biblical thing with panache and with confidence.
Okay, Joe?
Amen to that. Thank you, Bishop. This was a truly honor for you to take my call. I appreciate this.
God bless you. Thanks.
Me too, right, Joe? Oh, I'm just kidding. Sorry, Joe. I'm only playing with you. Let's see who we got next. Bishop Robert Barron is our guest. We're delighted to have him. Let's go to Edmonds, Washington. Listening on the Catholic Answers Live podcast is Wes. Wes, your question, please, for our guest, Bishop Robert Barron.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call. And my question is, I guess, in relation to the renewal of hope for the new evangelization is, what role does the traditional rite play in that? There's a tremendous growth, it seems to be, in the Latin Mass, right, especially in these times. And what role do you see that in regards to the new evangelization and the growth of the church?
Okay, Wes, thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. In both Chicago, where I'm from, and now out in the LA area, there's a vibrant, not huge, but I'd say a vibrant community of people that love the traditional Latin Mass. And it's allowed here. It was allowed in Chicago, many other places. And I'd say great. If that appeals to people, it appeals to their aesthetic imagination, their spiritual yearnings, terrific. So, as far as it goes, I'd say great. I'm somewhat resistant to those that seem to indicate sometimes like that's the answer, just more of the Latin Mass and the kids will come rushing back. I don't think that's true, but I'm delighted that it's there, that it's on offer, and that some people are finding it very compelling, and especially among the young. Great. I love Latin. I started studying Latin when I was 13 at Fenwick High School with Father Wren, who was a legendary Latin teacher. I've been reading Latin all my life because all my academic work has been in Thomas Aquinas. So I've read him in Latin for years. I have a Latin breviary that when I'm at my house, I typically pray evening prayer and night prayer with the Latin breviary. I love Latin, Now, I wasn't brought up with the Latin Mass. My generation wasn't, so I just don't know it, But in the measure that it helps some people find their way to Christ and to a vibrant spiritual life, great.
Thanks. I really appreciate the call, Wes, and the question. We're going to keep moving because there are lots and lots of folks who, as you might imagine, to speak with Bishop Robert Barron. Let's go to Jake in Queen Creek, Arizona, watching on YouTube. Hi, Jake.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
You sound great, Jake. Go ahead with your question.
Yeah, well, actually, I called. I haven't actually had a chance to read your book yet, Bishop Robert Barron, but on the topic of renewing the church, personally, I've mentioned this the last time I called. I've identified as a Protestant for a long time, but right now I'm standing right at the threshold of the church. But I've been in school over the past year or so in biblical studies at Grand Canyon University. And I guess a question on the topic of my education as well as my community and for the church as a whole, would it be more beneficial as a Catholic to continue to get a biblical education at this mostly Protestant university, or to look for a different type of university for the sake of getting a more Catholic biblical education?
Yeah, I'd have to know you better probably to give you a really good answer to that. I'm somewhat reluctant, just to give an answer at a distance like this. I've known some very fine people who've gotten degrees from Protestant institutions, especially in Bible, and then have gone on to become really powerful Catholic, preachers and teachers and writers. I guess my instinct, if I was gathering right, you're not a Catholic yet. You're sort of on the verge of becoming a Catholic, or you're intrigued by it. If you're finding life there and you're driving a lot of good insight and wisdom, maybe finish your degree and then make your way to the church. If you're already you're about to enter the church, I might say no. Let's sign you up at a Catholic institution. So I don't know you well enough. I'd have to get to know you a bit better and know your exact situation. Cardinal George used to say that the Catholic Church has all the gifts that Christ wants his people to have. That's why it's the fullness of the ecclesial life. But it doesn't mean, he said, that other Christian communities might not exercise certain of the gifts better than we typically do. His point there was sometimes you'll find some outstanding preaching and outstanding biblical exegesis in Protestant settings. Heck, I've benefited enormously from Protestant thinkers. Think of Karl Barth, whom I referenced. So anyway, that's my rambling answer to. There's great value, I think, even within a Protestant framework, to learn certain dimensions, let's say, of the Bible. Ultimately, sure, I'd love to see you within a Catholic intellectual framework.
Jake, I hope that's helpful to you. If I could just say a name, and Bishop Barron can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but Dr. Michael Barber over at the Augustine Institute does a lot of blogging on the Bible, and he went to a Protestant university. He's a Catholic scholar, probably one of the great Catholic scholars on the Bible. Maybe associate yourself, whatever your decision is, Jake, with Dr. Michael Barber a little bit. Just look into who he is. And
he's good.
Yeah, read some of his blog posts. And I know some of his blog posts are over at a little place called wordonfire.org, so you can find them there. Thanks, Jake, and God bless you, brother, as you make the decisions that are going to be formative for you here. We better take a break, actually. I want to mention the Word on Fire Bible again before we take a break. And I am going to go, with callers, don't go anywhere. I'm going to let you talk with Bishop Barron as soon as we come back. But the Word on Fire Bible, designed for the person who might be intimidated or anxious about opening up that Bible and digging in. It illuminates the biblical texts in light of the entire Christian tradition with all kinds of helps there for you. You can get it right now at shop.catholic.com. Because we've got Bishop Barron on as our guest, we've got a special price for you over at shop.catholic.com, the Word on Fire Bible.
Bringing you the truth. Catholic Answers Live.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
St. Paul's street evangelization isn't like other evangelism you might have seen on the streets. We don't yell, and we don't force anyone to pay attention to us. Instead, St. Paul's street evangelization is committed to presenting a positive, passionately Catholic presence to a world hungry for truth. For more information, or to start a chapter of your own, go to www.streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com. It's time to do our part.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
The prayers of the elderly are powerful. Why? Because you learn in old age to depend upon God. There's no one else. Because you are still made to the image and likeness of God, no matter how old you are. You're valuable to God. Don't let anybody tell you you're not.
For more information on Mother Angelica, visit Religious Catalog at EWTNRC.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Enjoying our Monday. Bishop Robert Barron, our guest. Bishop Robert Barron, the maker of the Catholicism series, and then some subsequent. You did, what's the one that follows? It's like the great figures of Catholicism. Did I get it right? Or
the pivotal players.
Pivotal players.
Pivotal player. We just finished that. So the 12 of them now are out.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that series too.
Is Teresa of Avila one of them? I think I remembered. Teresa?
No, because I
Or
featured her
Catherine?
very strongly in the first series.
That's where I saw
No, it's a
that.
whole slew of people, from Augustine to Aquinas to Michelangelo to Chesterton to Flannery O'Connor, Fulton Sheen, all kinds of people.
Flannery O'Connor made the list. Very good. The pivotal players. All right. Bishop Robert Barron's newest book is called Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. There are lots of folks on the line. So we go back to callers now. Kevin in Lexington, Kentucky, watching on YouTube. Glad to have you with us, Kevin. Go ahead with your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop Barron. Thank you for having me on. Big honor to speak with you. Big fan.
Thanks.
So I guess my question is this. As a ex-Catholic non-believer myself, I fully admit that the truth value of a claim doesn't have anything to do with how depressing that claim might be. But when something is hopeless, it kind of seems far less attractive, and it might persuade someone to look to another option. I used to be a rad trad Catholic, and the rad trads, I think, have a rather depressing, hopeless stance. Just in general, that might just be their disposition. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that there's anything that particularly the rad trads can do to be more hopeful, or is there really any reason that I should, I don't know, take another look?
Well, what I would do is take a good hard look at Vatican II. I take my bearings from the Second Vatican Council, from the Catechism of 1992, the great magisterium of John Paul II and Benedict and now Francis, that are coming right up out of the inspiration of Vatican II and following its trajectory. And I tend to read, both extreme left and extreme right, kind of splitting off from that consensus. So that's where I am. I'm with if you want to put it in more theological terms, I'm with the Ressourcement, Nouvelle Théologie, Balthazar de Lubac, Danielu, Wojtyła, Ratzinger. That's the tradition that I identify with. And I would say, my own answer to people on both the hard left and hard right, I would revisit that great tradition, represented best by my great hero, John Paul II. That's where I come from. And I would look at that long and hard.
Kevin, thank you. I appreciate the question. I'm going to keep moving because I'm realizing we're getting close to the end here, and I do have a bunch of folks waiting on the line, but we appreciate your question. Bishop Robert Barron, our guest, his new book is Renewing Our Hope. 888-318-7884 is our number. Let's go to Flint, Michigan. We're watching on Facebook Live is Sawyer. Sawyer, thanks so much for joining us. Your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop Barron. So I just have a quick question. I read an article recently that talked about how religiosity tends to increase after pandemics, and that the COVID-19 pandemic is making people more religious. And I was just wondering if you saw this kind of pattern playing out in your travels. And then secondarily, recently I really revamped my faith through apologetics. You and William Lane Craig and others have been great in kind of directing where I go to look for information. And I was just curious as to what you think the next step for apologetics will be.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Your first observation is interesting. I think that's probably right, that often during times of cultural crisis, people have what the theologians call limit experiences. They come up kind of against the limits of life. And that's when you tend to look across that limit into the alluring abyss that we call God, So there's a lot of truth to that. And that's a good question. I don't really know, honestly. I've not been looking at statistics about that. We're probably too close to it. Has COVID led? Of course, people can't come back to church in the same numbers, So it's a good question. I don't really know. I'm glad about apologetics. And, I enjoyed, it's now almost 2 years ago, I had a session with William Lane Craig that I very much enjoyed. We exchanged academic papers in the afternoon, and we kind of fought about that, about God's simplicity. But then in the evening, we had an open session that was more of a Q&A and, dialogue. And I enjoyed it very much. And I give Craig a lot of credit. I mean, I think he, at a crisis moment when the new atheists were just pummeling religion, he stepped into the breach there. So I give him a lot of credit, Where's it going next? I do think a new apologetics is still very much a desideratum. That's a fancy way of saying something we need, you know. And so where's it going next? I don't know. It's the dialogue with the nuns, the NONES. When I was on Reddit AMA, you know about that, the Ask Me Anything, when you just open yourself and tens of thousands of people engage me. Not because they know who I am, but I just said, hey, I'm a bishop. I love talking to atheists and non-believers. And with that, 10,000. Number one question by far, how do you know there's a God? So that's an apologetics question, you know? So don't believe people that say, oh, apologetics, no one's interested in that. Yes, they are. They're intensely interested in it seems to me. And so we need work in that area of proving again to people that God exists, talking about the fundamentals. So I'm all for apologetics.
Sawyer, thanks very much. Appreciate the call. I got to keep moving. Get as many as I can on here with Bishop Robert Barron, whose new book is out now, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. Let's go to Max in Omaha, Nebraska, listening on 102.7 FM. That's our friends at Spirit Catholic Radio. Max.
Yeah, I know them. Yeah.
Oh, you know Spirit Catholic Radio? They're good.
I sure do. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I say they're good, but I hardly know anybody who has they've quit their jobs or they've gone out and raised money when they've never done it before to start some Catholic radio station. These are the people that are revolutionizing the world. I mean, Bishop Robert Barron can talk all he wants, but if there's nobody there to broadcast that, it just has. It really is. To me, it's one of the great signs of the work of the Holy Spirit in our time has been the flowering of Catholic radio.
I agree. Yeah.
So let's go to our caller from Spirit Catholic Radio. Once again, that is Max in Omaha, Nebraska. Max, go ahead with your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hi, Bishop Barron. Thank you for the work you do, your Catholicism series. It's been really helpful. I'm really inspired by many of the things you say, especially on culture and art. It's been really, really good. So my question is, if we have friends that are far away from the faith, like a Ben Shapiro or a Dave Rubin, and they want to know about the faith, but they're told, hey, just go through Catholicism is the privileged way. It's not the only way. How do we evangelize them properly if we can't give them the hope of the Catholic faith?
Listen to the entire answer I gave to Ben Shapiro, where I'm teaching Lumen Gentium 16. So Vatican II clearly teaches that one outside the official, limits of the Catholic Church can be saved. Not will be, not that I know it, not that we don't have to evangelize. Listen to the whole answer I gave Ben Shapiro, where I talked a lot about how his Judaism leads very naturally toward Catholicism as the fulfillment of it. So don't take one word. Take the whole answer I gave him, which is simply Lumen Gentium 16. I'm staying with Vatican II's view there. A non-Catholic can be saved. That's the teaching of the Church. Now, it doesn't mean we give up on evangelization or that, I'm not going to worry about it. Of course, everyone's saved. No, not at all. But his direct question to me was, so there's no hope for me, huh? It's just no hope. Well, no, that's not the teaching of the Catholic Church. So that's what I said to Ben Shapiro.
Thanks, Max. I do appreciate your question. I don't understand why people won't tell us what their real question is today. It's not a respectable way to speak to somebody, especially, you have a bishop who has brought just thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of people closer to Christ. And just at least tell us what the question is that you're going to ask him. Ben Shapiro couldn't take it anymore. He left California. He's not our fellow Californian anymore.
That's right.
Let's go to Steubenville, Ohio. I know what you have there in Steubenville, Ohio. I always know what you people are doing there. Let's see. Will, watching on YouTube in Steubenville, Ohio. Your question for Bishop Robert Barron.
Hey, Bishop Barron. This is so exciting for me to ask you a question. I'm actually so grateful for you because I came back to the faith, reverted to Catholicism through your ministry. So I'm just a fruit of Word on Fire, and I can't be more grateful.
Beautiful.
And now I'm studying here at Franciscan University. Just started my master's here in theology.
Nice.
And so my question for you is, Paul says in First Corinthians 2, that he doesn't come with eloquence or human wisdom when he preaches the gospel. But it seems to me there's so many gifted evangelists like you Dr. Hahn, many others that have such eloquence and just share the faith in such a beautiful way. And I wanted to ask you, how can we do that? How can we work on our oratory skills and to work on our storytelling in how we are poetic in our speech and how we share the gospel?
Yeah, good. I mean, I'd say immerse yourself in the great tradition. People ask me all the time about, using social media and what do I do to get more involved in this. And I always say, especially with younger people, read, 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 and read. In other words, you got to have something to say before you use the social media to say it. And so get immersed in the great intellectual tradition. But I like your instinct too, is get immersed in the artistic tradition and the rhetorical tradition. I spent a lot of years studying this stuff when I was a student, a doctoral student, and then eventually a teacher. So I spent years in, classrooms at Mundelein Seminary teaching this stuff. And I taught a course years ago called The Christology of the Poets and Preachers. So having studied the formal teaching about Jesus, nature and person and all this, I wanted them to read like the sermons of Origen and Augustine, to read Bernard on the Song of Songs, to read Chesterton, to read, the great preachers and the poets. Dante, I had them read. So get immersed in that too. Read Paul. Of course, Paul is being a little, you might say, falsely modest there. Talk about someone who had plenty of eloquence, knew how to use, the traditions of Greek rhetoric and all of that. I mean, Paul was no slouch. And so, here I have a little, simple language. Well, that's not true, of course. So begin with him and then go right through the whole tradition. And wonderful. Now you're at Steubenville, a great place, studying for your master's. Here's your moment, use it. I always go back, this is 30 years ago, I guess now, when I was a student in Paris. No one knew who I was. I lived in a little tiny room at the Redemptorist house on the Boulevard Montparnasse. And I was sitting like in my blue jeans and stocking feet and my feet up on this kind of big suitcase thing that I brought over from the States. And I was reading. And it was usually raining in Paris. And I was reading and reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. And that's how I'm able to do some of the things I can do now.
The formation. This is something we Catholics are supposed to be really good at, the formation. I wonder if we're as good at it as we used to be.
Yeah.
Will, thanks. I appreciate your call. Bishop Robert Barron is our guest. Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization is the new book. And he discusses so many of the things that we have discussed here on the show, but many others and in great depth that we wouldn't be able to cover on the show. I hope you will get the book. I want to come back around to where we started. Really, it's all about communicating the person of Jesus Christ. We really don't have anything else.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's the heart of the matter. And coming to know him and letting him know us, maybe even more importantly, letting Christ reconfigure us. Let Christ make us ask different questions. So if I just lead with my questions all the time, then he's going to start corresponding to what I need or am interested in. Rather, let him ask and answer his own questions in us, might be a way to put it. That's what happened to the apostles, I think, as they spent time with him, is they began to ask questions they never dreamed possible, Right. They saw something they never thought was even vaguely imaginable. And that's the great good news, this still explosive good news of Christianity.
Praise God, and thank God for bishops like you, Bishop Robert Barron. May we have your blessing before we go?
You may. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down upon all of you and remain with you forever and ever.
Amen. Bishop, we're always so grateful when you take the time with us. And,
I always enjoy it.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, you busy tomorrow?
I'll be back.
Well, actually,
no, have me back. I enjoy it.
Very good, and I keep up the good work. We got lots of friends over there at Word on Fire. You can find them at wordonfire.org, where you can find the new book, Renewing Our Hope, Essays for the New Evangelization. You can find out about the Bible you're going to get for your whole family for this Christmas. It's called the Word on Fire Bible. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here with 2 hours of open forum on Catholic Answers Live.